Hey, what is up, Declaration? Happy Thankful Thursday. Glad you guys are here. I'm joined with Pastor John Sherrill.
Yes, sir.
The man of the hour.
The moment.
The moment.
Whatever, on Epilogue.
yeah. But the man today.
Today, right here.
We have.
This is actually the first time I've done this in a while.
It has been. It's been 2 weeks.
Because I think Aaron handled a couple
that's
of
true.
Epilogues.
Aaron did a few.
Yeah, so it's good to be back.
Welcome back.
Did you miss me?
I did.
Okay,
I mean, I see you every day, so
you do.
More or less. I miss you.
I know this is the first epilogue of a very brief 3-week series.
So I think it was cool, and if you watch online, you probably noticed a lot because I feel like every week I put this in the little tidbit about it. We're talking about 2 verses, but 3 weeks over 2 verses.
3 weeks over 2
verses.
verses.
Got to say something about the 2 weeks or the 2 verses.
Well, yeah, I felt like that there were 3 practical truths really that kind of were illuminated in these 2 verses that pointed us to how to walk in abundant life. I never really used that phrase, though I think it's in all of our notes. I never really said that, but I do think it's 3 practical truths that help us understand how to walk in abundance, and so. That's why, hence the 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so Romans 12:1-2, Paul, he had just finished chapter 11 with this incredible benediction because of the greatness of God, basically, if I just summed it up. He says, not just I compel you, but I urge you, I exhort you, I beg with you, I plead with you, depending on the translation you read. And he's speaking to Christians, fellow faithful followers of Jesus, by the mercies of God. Spent a lot of time talking about looking through the lenses, like as if, you're looking through the lenses of the mercies of God. Spent a couple weeks, highlighting Lamentations 3, I think verse 22, I think it was, how his mercies never end. We talked about, his mercies are new every morning. I mean, mercy is basically us not receiving that which we really deserve. And so when we think of that and understand what God has saved us from, then we look through those lenses. It helps us to see God differently. It helps us to see life differently. That's the hope, at least. And so I think this is what Paul was getting at. When we begin to look at all of life, the totality of life through the mercy, just the generous, good mercies, kindness of God, he's saying, let's start from that frame, if you will, that frame of reference. That's the foundation. That's the place to begin from. And then he goes on to, present your bodies. Actually, that was week 1, by the mercies of God. Yeah. And then we went into week 2 was presenting your bodies as a living and a holy sacrifice. He called it your spiritual service of worship. That in and of itself could have been a week, honestly. But we kind of tied it into don't be conformed to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. That's what I saw as really number 2 for us to really camp on and spend some time on, because honestly, I think that the spiritual battle is really not just for your affections, but really for your attention. Yeah, it's your mind. That's the battlefield where the spiritual war is really raging. And people, like, for example, people just kind of handicapped in shame, right? That's a great example. Well, that's not necessarily my heart's in anxiety as much as it's, man, my mind is on the merry-go-round of shame, and I can't seem to get off this ride that I don't want to be on, and the enemy is using everything against me, and it's just in your mind. And so Paul is talking about, having a change of mind. I think often we generalize quickly and say, no, just change your behavior, right? Well, easier said than done. Yeah. Man, I like pizza. I could be 30 pounds lighter if I would just change my mind on how I viewed pizza, right? A bad example, but that's what I'm talking about. It's like a mindset is so deeply important. Paul got it. He understood it. And that's why he didn't say, I urge you present your bodies as a living, holy sacrifice, acceptable, pleasing to God. Yeah, he says that, but he's not speaking to behavior as I think as much as he's speaking to your life, your lifestyle. I think too, these verses, at least this first part of the verse that we've kind of been sitting on, reminds me a lot of course we have 2:20 coming up, but it reminds me a lot of Galatians 2:20, Youth Camp 2:20,
which is just dying to yourself, right? And that, I think, comes to a renewing, right? Because even that verse goes on to say, it's no longer I that lives, but Christ who lives in me.
Paul gives you perspective.
Transforming of yourself.
Yeah, he's talking like he's seeing the perspective of the life that I now live. I live transformed. I live, what does he say? I've been crucified with Christ. No longer I who lives, but it's Christ that lives in me. And now the life I live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So Paul's even saying, I'm seeing this perspective of a loving God who gave himself for me. What more then could I do? I'm going to live for him. I'm leaning in, I'm yielding. I'm allowing him to operate through me now. I'm letting go, right? I'm not going to try to be, here it is. I'm not in control. I'm yielding. And so I think that's Paul, everything Paul writes is pretty secular. Yeah. It's some of the same concepts, maybe phrased just differently.
Geared towards different groups of people.
Exactly. He's talking to different churches, different people, speaking to some different contexts. He may say something that it shoots right into the heart of the Jewish culture, but at the same time, his ministry's to the Gentile, right? And so here we know that he's speaking to a Greek crowd, and he's saying some things that might be jarring to them in a sense. Living in holy sacrifice. This is a little different. It's not that they wouldn't know, but it's not necessarily their practice per se. But Paul's teaching them. He's, this is your spiritual service of worship. Don't be conformed. When he speaks to the pattern of the world, he is definitively speaking to the Greek in mind. He's got that in mind, right?
Yeah, if you think of a worldly culture.
Exactly. In fact, we could just kind of, pick that up and just place it right where we are right now. Yeah. And that's why the words of Paul are so relevant when he says that and talks about the renewing of the mind. And so that was week 2. And then obviously last week, week 3, as we've wrapped up this brief series, was so that you may prove or determine, decipher what the will of God is, which is good, acceptable, and perfect. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know.
Which I think again comes back to even verse 1 where it talks about, living a holy sacrifice acceptable to God, right? Mm-hmm. Which comes back, of course, which is good and acceptable and perfect. Right. And I think that all comes through sacrifice, which again is what he's saying here. And I think you even on Sunday you talked about sacrificing too. Like we live in a culture where it's so easy to celebrate something, or that of course God does not deem as holy.
Right. Well, so the exact phrase, Shane, that I said was, it's actually something that my mother-in-law used to say, and she would say, what one generation tolerates, the next generation will embrace. Mm-hmm. And then I kind of took it a step further based on things I was seeing just in my own mind, right? Mm-hmm. Was yes, but then the next generation will celebrate. And I think that that's where we are right now, where we are living in a context like no other. It's like we're like in this weird little microcosm of things that are going 100 miles an hour, and definitively the goalposts continue to move and things change on the daily. Mm-hmm. And if you can't keep up, then you're canceled quickly. I suggest as a follower of Jesus, we're already canceled, and so we don't need to worry with that anxiety of trying to keep up with the Joneses of the culture. But at the same time, we can look at it through a biblical lens, a loving biblical lens. The Bible, in my opinion, should never be used as a weapon, right? But we look at that through a loving biblical lens, and we recognize and are able to say, no, this is definitively wrong, not because of morality, but because of what God created and intended you for, and what God, just that's it, what he created you for, and also what Jesus died to offer in not just eternal life, but you've got a purpose on the planet, right? Yeah. You've got a few minutes and hours to breathe and function, and in that time frame of while we're here, I believe God has an abundant life that he's called us to live, a victorious life, a generous life, a peaceful life, and in that victorious, generous, and peaceful life, if we're constantly trying to mimic and pattern our ways after what we see on the planet and trying to please the culture of today, which, by the way, again, is going to shift and change tomorrow, if we're constantly trying to keep up with those Joneses, we're chasing our tail, and we're not living in the rest of the grace and the mercy of Jesus and what he died to give to us. Mm-hmm. That's one. Number 2, you look at the pattern and the culture of the world, and you realize, truly, my mother-in-law was right. What one generation tolerates, I don't want to hear about it. I want to deal with it. I'm going to put my head in the sand. My parents' generation, for whatever purpose, let me go back. Let's back that up. In the 50s and 60s, it was like this, kind of the epitome of the Instagram filtered family before we had Instagram filters, right? Leave it to Beaver, if you will. And so we don't talk about certain things. In fact, in the church, you put your head in the sand. Yeah. You don't talk about those things. Those things aren't real. They don't exist, right?
Which I think hurts the church in the end.
It hurt the church. So we don't talk about it. It's not real, you know. So things like even sexuality and things like that, instead of having a robust, theological, intelligent, compassionate, loving conversation about that and how God created sexuality and in what context sexuality was given to mankind, we've allowed the culture to co-opt that and to corrupt it. And now it's like we're catching up and we sound like we're on the defense when truthfully we should be on the offense on this thing. Mm-hmm. You know, sexuality was a beautiful thing God created. And so I kind of highlighted that just a little bit, not really, just a little, but in the context of what one generation will tolerate, the next will embrace, and then the next will celebrate. And my comment was, you know, why do you think we have a national holiday now for every potential, even possibly sinful, broken thing that we have to recognize, you know? And it sounds harsh, but I'm trying to highlight that the goalposts are always moving, and if we're trying to keep up with the Joneses of culture, we're never going to.
Well, it comes back to sacrifice again. We're not willing to sacrifice that part of us.
Right.
Sinful nature. We all have it.
We do.
And that's what we need to sacrifice. We got to sacrifice our
We
flesh
die to that. We die to
live in
self.
the Spirit.
Right.
To live in what Jesus is calling us to live in.
And I don't even want it to sound like, oh, what an obligation. Yeah. That's not it, right? It's like, again, we're not on defense. We should be on offense. Man, God wants us to be actively a part of redeeming all things back to him for his glory. And so you look at all things and you're like, well, man, then how do we not play defense on this stuff? Well, guess what? We live the offense way. We live the way that we show God to be attractive in every way. Yeah. We live in a restful state of peace and assurance and confidence and hope and love. And eventually, man, that stuff becomes contagious. People begin to look at that and go, well, what's different? You know why we're not effective right now as in general as the church? I mean, go to Twitter for 10 seconds and you'll see. The church, by and large, is viewed as not very effective. And it's not being effective not because the church doesn't have a mandate or a mission, or not because the church doesn't have truth. It's because, by and large, at least in America, it's like the church has become so worried about being relevant that they've forgotten that redemption is relevant.
Yeah.
The message of redemption, the message of the cross is relevant. Yeah. You know, we're not gonna appease everybody and please everybody and tickle everybody in a way that helps them see truth, right? But at the same time, we don't have to weaponize the Bible either. Yeah. And so it's just a matter of let your life be the living testimony of what Paul was saying. You're looking through the lenses of mercy. You're living thankful. You're doing everything you can to follow Jesus, not in your own power. You're dying to self daily. You're asking God to change the way that you're thinking. You're asking God for the very mind of Christ, the mindset of Jesus. By the way, I'm not perfect at this. In fact, I'm not even good at it, right? But I'm a work in progress, and I'm okay to tell people that.
I think that's the whole thing, even about the church. We're all a work in progress.
Yeah.
I don't remember who it was, but when Declaration first started, I feel like that was kind of the saying that was going around.
I think it was Mike Rollins, one of our elders, who said, man, we're not perfect. We're just a bunch of broken people trying to get it right. Yeah.
Which I think when the church and the body of the church is willing to, put that out there, I think that it becomes so much more real of, man, we're professional Christians, as you put so much, but really, man, we're all just trying to figure it out. We all are broken and beaten.
Like I ran into one of our awesome ladies from our church, church family today at a lunch, and just kind of was at a meeting and passed by the table. Hey, how are you doing? Catching up a little bit. And that's one thing she talked about is just, the joy that she has and the fact that no one's trying to put on appearances. At least that's the goal. In fact, that's some of even our cultural language now is we want authenticity over appearance. And it's not about appearances. Appearances are, again, the Instagram filtered family that is fake, right? I mean, it's falsehood. At the same time, we don't have a license to continue to wallow in our defeat and our sin. Romans 6, right? Paul says, if grace abounds, then should you continue in sin? Of course not. No. Why? Because you understand what you've been saved from. You understand that you've got a calling now and a purpose, and there should be passion behind that. And so you're running towards this goal, right, of just the glory of God, the redemption of all things back to him, and then prayerfully sanctification, big church word there. But and so we have something to move towards, right? Yeah. I think that's where we miss it a little bit, is we feel like when we get saved, then we get stuck. We forget that, man, there's a purpose here, right? Like, there's a purpose for everything under the sun that God has created, and there's a purpose because there's another breath in your lungs that God has put there, right? And so man, we don't need to get saved and stuck. I mean, we have so much to look forward to. It's just a matter of living into that, which begins not with, God, what is your big purpose for my life? It's just, I'm going to know you and make you known and trust you daily for your mercies, and you're going to reveal your purpose. That's what the end of the whole thing was about, is that then so that you may prove what the will of God is, right? I'm going to do these things so that my life will be the living proof of the will and the goodness and the mercy of God.
I think, too, just like you said, it comes to taking it day by day.
It does.
Of each day waking up, surrendering, and just sacrificing.
Or if you're like me, like 20 times a day to surrender.
It's true, yeah. And just focusing on, man, what it is. And I don't know if there's much more to say about, there is.
Well, there's a lot of notes here that we didn't look at, but
it was also 3 weeks filled in.
It was 3 weeks.
But just thinking of, man, I don't know, if there's one thing that I would say to leave today with, to me, it's just really putting your life on the altar. And you said it too, living sacrifices have a tendency to crawl off the altar. But man,
I forget who said that once. I heard that somewhere.
Oh, so it wasn't you?
No, I'd love to claim that like I'm smart, but no, somebody said that somewhere and I heard it, and
it's just stuck. Things like that stick, man. But
it's in the Rolodex of my brain that sometimes I dust off,
There you go. For those of you who don't know what a Rolodex is.
Right. Right. Showing my age.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Man, I don't know. That's just the one thing that all of this said to me was just living a sacrifice. And I think to me, that's the one thing that is, it's hard to do, to put things that you want, things that you desire on the altar. But ultimately, that's what we're called to do. And when we put our lives on the altar, put our wants, put our desires on the altar, and allow it to be sacrificed, then that's when the Lord begins to really work through our lives. Not because of who we are,
right?
But even, the enemy is really good at making strong people weak. Yeah. But luckily, we have a God who's really good at making weak people strong.
Ooh, that was good, Shane. I like what you just did.
Not because of us, but solely because of him.
Well, and there's something else, too, that I don't want to escape us is, we think about, man, how messed up is this, God, that you want me to sacrifice all these things that I love? It's not that. It's that when we do find ourselves at a point where we recognize our need and that we're not seeing our desire satisfied in the things that we're seeking to be satisfied from, and then we begin to surrender and we do like, God, I'm gonna lay this down. You know what? It may be that God says, no, pick that back up.
Yeah.
That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing, and I want you to use it for my glory. It may be that God says, you know what? Finally, now I can give you something better.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's where we miss it. It's like, well, what am I going to miss out on, God, if I have to sacrifice or give this up, or you're asking me to forego my dreams and my desires? No. Guess what? Who is the author and the perfecter of your faith? Who is the creator and intentionally who created you on purpose, for purpose? Is it possible that he put that desire in you for something, but he just wants to redirect it when you give him control to? And so it's just like, let's not get ourselves in this paradox of thought or frustration that, well, if I have to give this up, then what? It's not that. It's like, God, what are you going to put in my hands when I open them?
Yeah.
Right? And so it's really about surrender to see the other side of what God has for you.
Yeah, God's desire is not for us to have a boring life.
No, that's the 11th commandment, right? That's not boring. Is that just mine? That's my 11th commandment.
It's a good one to have. Yeah. But, that's the whole thing, man. If you're willing to sacrifice, you're willing to put that on the altar, imagine what he's going to give you if you do that. And like you said, he may have you, Abraham put his son on the altar.
Yeah, that's a messy passage, and we taught that not long ago, and but you're right. And God's intention was never, obviously, that he was going to sacrifice his son. More so, it was a picture of what God was about to do for us with his son. And so, you read it at first blush, and you're like, well, what in the world is this guy? This is messed up, man. But when God shows, it's like, I don't know how many times that God has allowed me to go through certain seasons or certain things, and I didn't understand in the moment. In fact, I was frustrated, even angry with God. And it wasn't until later that I came back and went, oh.
Makes sense now.
Now I get it, right? It's the same thing. It's like, man, if you're willing to do that, if you're willing to open your hands and relinquish control and say, God, I surrender my will and my ways to your will and your ways, you're not going to come up empty-handed and disappointed.
Well, that's it. So that you may prove what the will of God is.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, hey, guys, thanks again for being here. I feel like this one went a little long. I don't actually know, but whatever.
Because you didn't
it's
set
good
the timer.
anyway.
Yeah.
I didn't set the timer.
That's right.
It's my fault. Whatever. Hey, thank you guys for being here. We love you. Sunday, we're starting a new series.
Yep.
So be a part of that. We have it's going to be a fun series called Mixtape. And I'm excited. Hope you're excited. So come be a part of it on Sunday. See you guys then.
Take care.